Ah, Okay, so welcome to our July edition of our Thrive Together Masterclass. The topic this month is the life-changing magic of an empowered executive assistant. And our special guest today, I'm so excited to introduce, is Monique Helstrom. One of Monique's claims to fame, one of the things she's best known for, one of her many talents is the fact that she was the chief of Simon Sinek, executive assistant to a very well-known thought leader in the industry, and so has lots of experience in that role, serving someone at a really high level, and now is turning those talents toward helping other partnerships and a leader, an executive, and their assistant thrive together and really shine. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts because we are coaching agents and admin in the real estate industry, likewise, to align and to communicate and to work together at the highest level, because really we know when sales and operations partner together, that's when a business is at its most successful. So thank you so much for joining us today, Monique.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about, what is an empowered executive assistant? What can they do for you? How can someone, the right person in the right role, sort of change your executive life?
Sure, sure. So I'll start with what empowerment means to me, I guess. And empowerment to me means self-awareness and the ability to regulate your skill set, just to be able to use it when needed and amplify it when needed and tone it down when needed. And I believe that that is something that we can all do. We can all learn what we do really well and do more of
Yeah,
it. I talk about
yeah,
that often with my coaching clients, strengths in action. So
yeah.
even if we individualize it, what can empowered humans just in general do for each other? If I know what I'm great at, if I know my skill set, if I know what my purpose is, if I know how I can help and what I can deliver, and if you know what your skill set is and how you can help and what you can deliver and what your personality is, there's a way that you can come together and make it even that more meaningful. I describe our skill set as tools that we have in our toolbox. And, an empowered human can say, I've got a screwdriver. I've got a screwdriver. And then the other, executive goes, I've got a screwdriver. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it comes together, but you can't always do that if you don't know who you are, or what you have.
Yeah, so I love that. The idea of like the self-awareness piece and the fact of doing that kind of inner work of figuring out, what are my strengths, where those lie, what are my values, what do I bring to the table? Are there certain assessments that you like for people to be able to figure that out? I mean, we know like the DISC assessment, one of the Margaret Smith, our dear friend, like she likes human design. So do you have, preferred ones to sort of know thyself?
My favorite is the Clifton Strengths. I talk about it
Okay,
all the time.
yes,
I call it
yes,
Clifton
I love
Strengths.
that.
I'm a big fan of that. And the reason that I'm a big fan of that one is because it doesn't, like some of the other ones do tend to put you a little bit in a box. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think
Right, there's like categories. You have a
understanding the
type. You have a
framework is a
type.
good thing, but uh it doesn't allow for assistance in those areas and what else you have that can build or break down the things that you already
Yes.
have. So I like Clifton Strengths because all it does is give you your strengths in order, 34 in order. So you know what you have, what you're really good at,
Yeah,
what you're
yeah, yeah,
maybe not so good at, and then you can work with the ones in the middle. But it's
yeah.
also the combination of what you have, which I think some of the other tests don't allow for.
It's
But
true. Yeah, your list is as unique as you are, right? In terms of
absolutely.
like, and then how they combine together. Because that's always what's most interesting about people is how maybe you have like varied into it's separate interests.
Yeah.
I did a history PhD, and my favorite history book was from someone who was obsessed with biology. He's a historian obsessed with biology, and so he wrote about the history of science, and it was amazing because he's doing something someone else isn't, and he's really drawing on that strength. I'm curious about yours. Do you know any of your top
Oh yeah.
strengths that you as
So,
an amazing executive assistant? Yeah.
I'm a number one achiever. I mean, I can tell you
I
that
know.
straight out of the gate. I'm a number one achiever. I always have been. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
if I took that test when I was 6 years old, I probably would have number one achiever on there. I know I have command, which is all about speaking up, standing up, and saying the thing. I don't have any problem asking for what I need. I don't have any problem using my mouth to a fault. But it's a strength of mine. It's what
Right.
helped
Yeah.
me get what I needed when I worked with Simon. It helped me become who I am now and sell myself as a business. It helps me when I'm standing on stage in front of thousands of people. So, the thing that I always say with strengths is there's no good and there's no bad. It's how you use it. A chainsaw inherently isn't bad. It's what you're
Right.
using the chainsaw for. So,
Right. Right.
people
So no
say,
surgery, not great for surgery,
"Oh,
but
kill
cut
someone
down
with
that
it."
tree.
No Freddy Krueger. Is he the one that uses a
Right,
chainsaw?
yeah,
One
yeah,
of them used a chainsaw. I don't
yeah.
remember. But it's how you use it. None are inherently good, none are inherently bad. There's
Right.
some people I know that they have empathy at the bottom of their skill set and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm not empathetic." I said,
Yeah.
that's not what that means. It
Right.
just means that's not your natural inclination, your natural tendency, your natural habit. You might go facts and figures first. You might go action first. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Use it to
Right.
your advantage.
Right.
So
Right.
long
Right. Right.
story short, empowered is all about using what you have with confidence and saying, I can use this and I can help people. Instead of
Yeah.
I don't have those things and I'm failing because
Right.
that little
Right. It's all where you shift that focus and
shift.
how you read those results. One of mine is positivity. And I didn't
Mhm.
even know that was like a thing. I didn't even know that could be something until I read it and you have a whole description. And I was like, oh, that is true, that I can find like a silver lining, or I can find I can reframe or spin it or something so that we feel a little bit better about the situation we're looking at, and that has value. You just have to know, as you said, know when to use it. So I love how you're talking about it. It reminds me a lot about what we teach in terms of versatility, right? And
Mhm.
really like knowing how to present yourself in the right way in the right situation, right? And like being able to read the situation, know what it calls for, and as you said, like reach in your toolbox, because that is a skill, is knowing what does the situation require from me at this time. And I think that sometimes people shy away from versatility because they think it's inauthentic. I'm
Mhm.
just going to be the same person in every context, and that means I'm really being me. But that's not the case, right? It's just how
Right.
a different version of yourself, a slightly different presentation is all that you need to change, depending on if you're talking to a client or a vendor or your boss or a family
Yes.
member, right? So
You
it's
just
normal
use
to,
it differently. Absolutely.
yes.
It's versatile and usable. I also don't believe in being in inch deep and a mile wide. The people that want to be everything, that look at their weaknesses or what they're not good at, and they keep trying to dabble in that, and they're not spending time on their strength set. So they kind of try to just be medium, and we can't be medium. That's not going to help this world if we're all just mediocre. Be great at the
Yeah,
things that you're
yeah,
great at and use
yeah,
them. It's just when to turn
yeah.
one up and when to turn one down.
Right. I love that.
Your
Yeah, like the
body,
dial, that the
you
dial
know when
idea.
to turn that up. You know how to use
Yeah.
that when needed. You can look around a room and go, and that's your superpower,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
know when it's not the appropriate time. So, and the more you do that, the more you use those joysticks or control panels, the more you can control it.
Yes, yes. So what are executive assistants generally good at? Like what is their zone of genius? What lane do they want to kind of strive for in order to perform at their best, but also feel their best about themselves? Because I think that's what happens sometimes when
Sure.
we go too far out of our zone of genius, our zone of excellence. We can do the work, but we start to question if we're really as amazing as we think we are.
Sure, sure, sure. So I do think that there's some, I don't want to call them basic and I don't want to call them general because I hate those words. There's a foundational
Skill set
aspect
or
to
quality.
the work that we do as an assistant and frankly as leaders, that organization as an executive
Yes.
assistant or assistant organization, being able to take large, hairy, scary problems and break them down into bite-sized nuggets and know how to achieve that achievement. We're very achievement oriented, so we have that ability to like understand what is needed and actually make that a reality in real life with real things and real tools. So that's, there's some of those. Most executive assistants can read people very well. Most executive assistants are pretty empathetic because that's what we do. So there's some foundational, but I always tell my admins that I train, there is not one answer from there.
Right.
If you're an executive assistant who has worked in oil and gas for her whole life, great. Do more. So you're going to need different skills. You're going to need a little bit more technical skills. You're going to need to know about that industry and sort of government relations and that. If you're an executive assistant who works for someone who throws a lot of parties and does a lot of events, then you need different skills. You need extroversion. You need a little bit of a salesy mentality. You need coordination. So while we need this foundational aspect, it's what you're interested in and what direction you want to go into or what field, just like any other job. If you're going to work for the medical field, if you're going to work for a real estate assistant your whole life, what do you need to do that part really
In
well?
that specific industry. Yeah. I like you're talking about that. One of the through lines is the ability to, as you said, like take these big problems and put them in bite-sized pieces and then take action to execute on them. Reminds me of the rocket fuel book from the EOS about the visionary integrator dynamic, right? And I do, again, we don't want to categorize people, but I do think like generally there are the people who are big idea, like just totally lit up by it, and then there are the people who are totally jazzed about bringing that to life. And I think if you naturally are drawn to I feel so good being the person that can actually make it happen, then that's kind of a good sign that that's a good role in the partnership for you. And it really does take both, right? And I think that that's something that has been undervalued in the assistant role traditionally. Like Kathleen Metcalf always talks about how it was like, understood as a clerk. Like here, I'm just going to pass stuff off to you. And I think in some stages of a role, that might be appropriate depending on someone's skill set or what the needs are. But in others, it's really helping empower them so that they can look big picture and take operations off your plate so that you are fully sales, and really elevate our understanding of the role, what's possible with the role. And therefore, when we have those elevated expectations, people rise to them, right? Yeah,
I agree.
Love it.
I agree. I tell my executives a lot when I'm coaching, especially first time executives who are getting assistants or admins for the first time. It's like, think of your. It's a weird analogy, I know, but I say, you probably have a brand new MacBook computer sitting right outside your door with bells and whistles and functionality and skills and smarts and learning capabilities, and they've got all these things, and sometimes you're using it to play solitaire. And if you want to use your assistant to play solitaire and do basics and do clerical work, sometimes that's needed. I get that. A lot in the legal profession for legal administrators and legal help, that they're doing a lot of sort of that paper churning. But again, that's not a bad thing. That's incredibly intelligent work to be able to churn that paper. So we just have to make sure that we're using our assistants to their fullest capabilities in the position that we've hired them for.
Yes. So I think that's a great place to start. Yeah, thinking about like how do you hire one? I think that happens a lot when we're working with agents, so they know they need an assistant, they need help, they're like up to here with the water. But they're like, what does that person even do? How do I figure out what I need? Do you have strategies for you to help people sort out what are you going to have that person help you with?
Sure. So obviously I do a lot of recruiting. This is a very specific relationship. This is a very unique relationship between an executive and their assistant. And I use the word relationship on purpose because it is relationship. It's a very specific relationship. At times, I mean, your admin is going to know your social security number and how much money you have in your bank account. And when you're fighting with your spouse, we know intimate details of your life, and it is a relationship and should be treated as such. So when we go look for this person, it's not a transactional job description type of role. So one of the errors is only looking for someone who fits the skill set. Their JD says you need to know how to do Microsoft Office and
Yes.
Salesforce and be
Yes,
organized.
and
And you're like,
pivot tables and
great, but
yeah.
I don't know who do you need? What kind of human being do you
Mhm,
need to
mhm,
fill
mhm,
that role? Again, is this role going to be someone who is doing a ton of event planning? Then you better get an extrovert. Write that on the
mhm,
job
mhm, mhm,
description. I
mhm,
need
mhm.
someone who's going to be really good with talking to people all day long.
Yeah.
So figure out the human you need for the role, not just the technical skills. Because frankly, technical skills can be taught, and most EAs are pretty
Mhm,
smart.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So
mhm,
the
mhm,
technical
mhm.
skills can be taught. Think of your values, because if you don't share the same values with your
Mhm,
assistant, it's
mhm,
going to be
mhm.
very hard to move forward productively.
Yes.
So if you're running an organization for battered women, you make sure that you're hiring someone who's a giver, who's a champion of the underdog, who has that sort of socialism cause inside of them, like whatever it might
Yeah.
be. Put that on the job description. When
Right.
I write job descriptions, I was an EA. I write them so specific for the type of human that I
Mhm,
need that
mhm,
it
mhm,
helps
mhm.
me get, I mean, I still get a ton of resumes, but helps
Right.
me nail it down more.
Right. And then they can raise their hand and be like, "Ooh, that's me," and they can kind of self-select so that really who you're talking to, and they can
Yeah.
identify right already coming in that they would be a good fit because they know themselves best,
Yeah.
obviously better than
And
we can when we do the resume,
yeah,
read the resume.
and forgive the saying, but don't hide the poop. Don't hide the poop. They're gonna know
Yeah.
the poop. When they come into
Yeah.
the office, they're gonna know that you're disorganized. When they come
Right.
into the office, they're gonna know that you haven't filed a paper in the right spot for 10 years. They're gonna know. Who
Yeah.
cares?
Right.
Tell
Right.
them one of the things I really need you to do is clean up my G drive because it is an
Right.
absolute disaster because I'm
Right.
terrible at
Right.
it. Isn't
And
that
I think
different than just not
right.
saying?
I think part of it is shame.
Yeah.
We tend to feel bad about the part or qualities that we don't feel like we have. And so we sort of just naturally want to hide them. But also, I've heard some of the executives or, agents I work with, they're like, but I don't want to throw them off like by asking them to do that kind of work. And I was like, you do know we enjoy that kind of work, right? Like you do know that I actually love to organize things and it's job security, right? The messier you are, the more sure I am that I'm going to still be able to work for you and, in several years because I feel needed. I see my value. And again, like just because you don't like that kind of work doesn't mean that no one does.
Yeah.
And so I think the more that you show it, the more people give people an opportunity to be like, oh yeah, that's my love language. Like I make
Yeah.
lists and
Yeah.
I,
Totally.
figure out how ideas fit together and
Absolutely.
objects fit together. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, this is how you hire an empowered assistant
Mhm, mhm,
is not hiding aspects that are important to the position. You don't have to
yes.
flaunt your weaknesses or say
Mhm,
I'm
mhm, mhm.
terrible at, but there's a hole in your organization somewhere, whether that be in process or procedures, whether that be in the finance department, whether that be in paperwork, there just might be holes. Talk about the holes.
Mhm, mhm,
'Cause
mhm,
then my empowered assistant with their tool belt on
mhm,
and
mhm,
they
mhm.
can, if I tell you what I need, I have 100 holes in my wall and I need to patch them and paint. If I've got patch and paint, I'm gonna raise my hand. If you don't
Right.
tell me that you have holes in your walls, I don't know what I'm helping you with. So
Exactly.
talk about
Yeah.
it. I need someone who's gonna be great at process and procedures because that's a specific skill set.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Right. And that's great if that's not your skills, it doesn't have to be you as the executive
It
skill set
shouldn't.
because exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't. If you're the
Because
CEO and
that's
you're
our
worried
lane.
about, I mean, come on.
The how, yeah. If you're like really in the weeds about the how, it just makes it so much harder for you to look at the big ideas, the big picture. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about how, because this is someone that you're going to really need to trust. You're going to need to build a lot of trust and fairly quickly ish if they're going to be able to help you at the level, the full capacity of what they can do for you. So how do you screen for someone that you're going to be able to trust? Is that something that you can figure out in the interview process? There's really, you have to walk down the steps of the pool with someone before you're actually going to know whether you feel comfortable with it or not. Is it a gut feeling? Are there questions to ask for, to suss out red flags? Like, how do we do
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, there's 1,000 answers to that. How do I want to start? I mean, trust is, generally speaking, something that takes a very long time to build and something that takes an instantaneous second to break down. It's built brick by brick by brick by brick. And again, can be taken down with a wrecking ball. But again, it's the same thing that happens in relationships or friendships. It's built brick by brick. When you first started dating your husband, it was different than it is now. You communicate more, you sort of open the door to like your likes and your dislikes, and you give of yourself, you show yourself in a different light, like this is me, this is good, this is what I got. And we need that time to build that relationship, and that those beginning stages, it's like a dance, when you're first dating
Yes.
somebody, you're like, hey, everything's going great. Do you want to spend the night? Whoa, 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 too fast, too fast, too fast.
Right,
Okay,
right, right,
go
right,
back,
right,
go back.
right, right,
And
right, right,
you
right.
had this push pull. It's going to happen here too.
Yeah,
So we just have to understand that you're not going to trust someone.
right. And then,
And tr-
that shouldn't be the expectation, right? Because sometimes I've seen people will be like, well, my assistant's supposed to be able to help me with that. So I'm just, I like pinch my nose and give it to them, even though I'm going against my gut or whatever. And I think it puts you,
yeah.
it's a recipe for disaster, right? Like it's okay if that takes you a long time, and to start with things low risk, right? And then as they follow
Yes.
through, as they keep their word, as they listen and you really feel heard, like, okay, maybe a little bit more, but you don't
A little bit
have to
more.
rush it.
You don't have to rush it. Yeah. I mean, from the outskirt, from the interview, you have to have a gut feeling. You have to.
Right, right,
And
right.
some of the questions that I ask are more personal questions, because if someone's not willing to tell me about their personal situation and I'm the executive, you gotta know. And they,
Right.
this has to be a mutual relationship. Again, if you're working in the social areas of working, as in and battered woman, it's place, I need to know your values. I need to know. So I'm gonna ask you about your values in your interview.
Right,
I want to
right.
know those kind of things. I asked for a lot of examples. One of my favorite questions that I ask is, how would your friends describe you? That tells me a lot. Because I throw it in the middle of a lot of intellectual questions, see the
Yeah.
reaction, to see what they say. So that helps me trust. Always a gut. If you're not willing to tell them more, it's going to be very hard to continue. But again, it is okay to be like, here's a little
Yeah,
piece, here's another little piece,
yeah,
here's another little
yeah,
piece,
yeah,
brick by brick, brick,
yeah,
brick,
yeah.
brick,
Trust
brick.
trust your instincts, and again, and honor your instincts, because like the dump and run, just I feel it is a reaction to people who struggle a little bit with trust, and they're like, well, I just gotta give it, and fit, and I think that that's a really I think that's really tough. One of the interview questions I like is, tell me about your previous employment situation, or what happened with that, because I think also the way that they talk about other people, the way that a candidate talks about other people and other employers, is really good reflection of how they might eventually talk about you or outside the job. And so I feel like you can suss out confidentiality, tact, empowered, accountability, all that kind of thing. So I think that that's usually a question that I'm paying a lot of attention to the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
And sort of
And
reading
for
that.
me, things like, did they research the company? Did they read my entire job description? Did they, when I say, do you have any questions for me? If they're go, no, like, none? You're
None,
going to
yeah.
work at this place in theory for the next 2 to 20 years of your life if you really wanted to. You have no questions. You don't want to know about the culture. You don't want to know about my executive. You don't want to know about how many holiday parties we have a year. Like, I don't know, ask a
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
I don't necessarily trust someone that is
Right,
is is gonna invest their future in something that they don't want to know anything about.
right. So the
All right.
curiosity
Sorry
piece
for
of
those
it.
out there that do this. I
Was
just
it
don't.
good? I think it's also like a big, like what not to do, in an interview, like trash an employer,
Question.
like not research. You got to be sure to research and sort of be curious and do your
Your
due
life.
diligence. Because as you said, it is a partnership. It is a relationship in that way, and you need to make sure that it's going to fit both. I think when you're in the job seeking position, sometimes it feels more vulnerable or more, like you just have to do anything to get a position. But then if you put the other hat on, it's like, this is someone who is going to open up their business and their life to you, and that what's more vulnerable than that? They're going to need to, put some of their success, some of their success is going to naturally depend on you showing up to work and you doing what you say you will, and you trying to be the best possible ambassador for them and extension for them, really having the integrity of like, I'm going to treat your business like it's my own. And those are the types of things that, yeah, it's can be hard to screen for, but that's ultimately what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I always tell my admins, if you don't meet your executive, if he's not one of the people that is interviewing you, the agent, the executive, whomever is hiring you, if you don't meet that person and all your meetings HR, don't take the job.
Yeah.
They're hiding him or her from you for
right.
some reason. And frankly, if this person doesn't care enough about this position to know who you are, they're not going to care about you either. So I will tell you,
sure.
red flag.
At a certain point, yeah.
If the person hiring you that you're going to be working with doesn't want to meet you during the interview, red flags all over the place. Don't take the job.
Got it. That's good. That's good evidence. That's good experience, that you've had over time to figure out what works and what doesn't. Let's talk about one of your favorite topics, which is communication. What are your recommendations for people for how to, I mean, first of all, even as you're interviewing, figuring out like what kind of a communicator you are and what kind of a communicator you need, and then potentially maybe, verbalizing that, right? And just being as clear as possible about what would make it work best.
Yeah. So clarity, communication, lots, especially in the beginning. Again, this is a brand new relationship. If you're not communicating every hour, every day, there's in the beginning, you got to talk a lot because this is the foundation, they're learning a new language, and you can't start speaking Italian to someone the first day that they're learning the language. They have to understand the foundation. That's one of the reasons we love doing things like organizing Google Drives and SharePoints, is because guess what we're learning? We're looking at every document and we're going, oh, I saw that, and okay, that means that cheese does that. Boop, 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 boop. We're like making our puzzles in our heads. So that was a bit off topic, but clarity.
Yes, I love.
Don't use what is called blur words, but blur words are things that different things to different people. So for the agents and the executives out there, say what you need. If you need something by 5 o'clock p.m., say I need it by 5 o'clock p.m., not I need it later. I need it soon. Do it immediately. Can you try harder? My ultimate favorite, we need you to be more engaged. What in the world does that mean to you? Explain what being more engaged means to you. I want to see you send more emails. I don't know. Or I want to see you at more holiday parties. I don't know. Tell me, especially when giving, delegating tasks.
Yes, I was going to ask about
Delegating tasks, clarity. What do you want this end goal to be? What do you want the outcome to be? What does it smell like, taste like, sound like, feel like? Describe this end state, because you're the visionary and you have this in your brain and you know what it looks like on the back end. Describe that. Don't worry as much about the route that they take. Describe the destination you want them to arrive in. They'll figure out how to do it in the middle, unless you have to tell them stuff in the middle, which is fine, but be clear. And at the beginning, feedback constantly. This is, I have almost never heard an assistant say that they didn't want feedback, especially at the beginning. I've never heard it. They all want to know how they're doing. So in those beginnings, hey, can you do this little thing? They do the little thing, they give it back to you, and you say, hey, can you make it red instead of blue? Sure. Immediately, feedback, immediately, tweak. Because then in 3 months, there's going to be no tweaking. Instead of you just
and then exactly, and now it's like it's too late to tweak, and now you feel bad. I mean, we want to get it right. I was
You'll
going to
be like,
design it like we want to get it right. We want to hit the mark. We want to wow, if possible, exceed
yeah,
expectations. So we need to know what the expectations are and know how to
yeah,
adjust
yeah.
so that we can reach them. But again, like we can't really ever fully mind read, but we definitely can't even attempt it in the beginning.
No, and
But that's the
especially if you
time we
have
need.
something specific. If you already
Yes.
have something specific in your head, please say that out
Yeah,
loud.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't assume that I know what you have in your brain. I had this experience at maybe the end of last year, talking with an executive who was fuming to me about their assistant, about how hard it was to read their daily reports. They send like a daily list of things that they do over and over and over again. And it's in email and it's in bullet points, and she just changes the colors. And she was fuming to me about it. And I said, well, how did you set it up in the beginning? Like, were you using Excel or Asana or something
Did
in
you
the
give a
beginning?
model or
Like,
something?
how did it start off? And she was like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, did you tell her how you wanted it in the beginning? Well, no. Well, why are you sitting here fuming at me?
Yeah,
What,
yeah, yeah.
like, don't,
That's a feedback issue. Yeah, 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 yeah.
tell her. I said, why don't you, I said, right now, go into her office and say, hey, could you do me a big favor? Could you send me the list in an Excel spreadsheet instead of email? And I watched her do it, and she said it, and she went, okay. And she came back down. She
Easy.
was like,
Why do you think that wasn't her immediate reaction? Like I think human behavior is really interesting in this regard. Or it's sort of like you can observe it in these dynamics. Some of our habits for how we communicate with others, sort of there's like a magnifying glass on it, right? Like maybe, sometimes we want to avoid conflict or
yep,
confrontation. Some of us have like behavioral styles that lead towards that. And so it feels like it would be a really big deal
yeah,
to be able to say something like that, whereas as you said, it's very simple actually.
yeah, yeah. We all have our inadequacies. We all have the things. We all have
Right,
stuff.
right, right,
We're
right.
messy individuals. We're messy
Yeah,
humans. We
yeah.
all got stuff. And where I guess the magic part is, even if you have a tendency or behavior to be in one way, if you see the benefit in this specific instance outweighs the internal feeling that you're going to have, sometimes we have to stretch ourselves. Things like
Right.
hard conversations. 70% of workers are avoiding hard conversations these days. It is an insane number, 70% insane. That's ruining our businesses these days
Right,
if
right,
we
right,
don't
right.
have these conflicts. And conflict might never be easy for you, or having a hard conversation, or telling someone that they hurt your feelings. It might not be easy. You might get the
Right.
butterflies and but sometimes it's worth it.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Or
you have
maybe
to do it.
even often it's worth it, right? It's
Sometimes you
because
got to
it's
do it.
like, yeah. And then on the other side of that, we have it's a relationship building, strengthening experience to be able to be vulnerable and to have someone listen to you and sort of adjust accordingly. Plus the behavior itself can be
Right,
resolved. And so like
right,
that can be
right.
really
Right.
worth it
And
for sure.
and again, that's it, there's nothing bad or good about having some of these tendencies that we have. If we're shy, if we're introverted, if we don't like confrontation, there's nothing good or bad about it. But when the time comes where it is needed for your own growth, for somebody else's growth, in order to make the world function better, figure out how to attack the problem the way that you would attack the problem. I speak up. So if I have an issue, I come right up to somebody's face and I tell them that I have an issue. That's me. That's how I do it. If you're shy and you're introverted and you're vulnerable and you don't really want to say those kind of things, then call on the phone and be like, this is really hard for me to do. And I kind of feel like a twat doing this. Sorry.
Yeah.
But do it in a way that's comfortable, that makes you. I said this to a coaching client the other day. She was like, when I'm talking with my boyfriend face to face, it just feels so vulnerable. It's really hard for me. And I said, well, why don't you go on walks and go side by side? So you're not staring at each other. You're still in energy space, but you're side by side, and,
That's
do what
amazing.
works
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, yeah,
Do what
yeah,
works for
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And
There isn't, You could do it any way you want. That's the book of boundaries, Melissa Urban. She's always talking about you can do it any way you want, which is very freeing, right? And so it's like just because you think you should, have these conversations, as you said, face to face. As someone who's introverted and like avoids conflict and this sort of internal processor, I do find Susan Scott's Fierce Conversations. Well, there's like a handout, a conversation preparation form.
I have her book. It is
Yeah.
highlighted. It is dog-eared.
Yeah. So she has like a way basically to collect your thoughts, so that when you present them, it is sort of intentional. And I think that's a big relief for me, where it's like, okay, I got it down on paper. I know the essence of what I want to say, and so I feel prepared to lead it, to lead a conversation like this in a way that I'm different. Otherwise, it's just in my head all smushed around. It feels scary and big and intimidating for sure.
My favorite
I'm
thing in her
curious.
book, and so many things in her book that I love, but my favorite thing in her book, the favorite line for me is when she says the conversation is the relationship. And so the history and background is, I think they were talking to a couple, and the husband was saying to their wife, like, why do we have to keep having the same conversation? Why do we keep having to talk about the same thing over and over and over again? Don't you just know? And Susan's like, that is the relationship, is that continuous conversation. It doesn't, that's how we connect, is through communication. So
Right.
that these conversations throughout time, whether you're an idiot and you fumble or not, the fact that you're doing them builds trust, builds vulnerability, it builds a relationship with the other human being. So it is powerful and should be seen as such. And you can screw up. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the point is that we're also always reading each other. We are always getting like communication clues and cues from from our partners, whether it's verbal or not. And so, you like a tone of voice or a body language thing. And so when it's not verbalized externally, right, then we start to tell stories. Like, they're hunched, or they must be mad at me for something or something. And that might not be it at all, right? But if you don't have the information, you just go on the story that you've created, and those stories are much more reflection of us than they are the other person.
I
think that's what it is. I'm always like, you just, if you're aware of it, you're like, oh wow, I'm always reading the cues, I'm always reading. And so that's where it's like thank goodness we have words. Thank goodness we have words to fall back on. And it's interesting what you said earlier about, avoid blur words, right? So the words that are that where the meaning is sort of like unclear. But I think actually for me, most words actually could be blur words, right? Because even though something as concrete as like a chair, right? But like I say chair, you think whatever you're picturing right now is inherently almost absolutely different from what I'm picturing in my head of a chair. And so I like the idea of sort of always just defaulting to what I say is not going to be what someone hears. Like my meaning is not necessarily always going to be interpreted exactly the way I said it. I know exactly what I mean, but like we're gonna kind of have to assume that they don't. And so that's where you said like the relationship comes from, the back and forth, the exchange. Like you can ask, like, here's what I need. Can you repeat back to me what you heard? And that's where you'll catch like so many errors, right? If you say like you think you're being very clear and you're like, I need it by the end of the day, and they're like, they hear 6 p.m. and you meant really like 5 p.m. because after that they're about to leave or whatever, it's sort of like, that's how you can pay attention, because it's often so unconscious how we don't see the gaps in our communication, because if we knew they were there, we would fill them, but we need that like reflector back.
I mean, even the word immediately. If somebody told me to do something immediately, I would drop what I'm doing and do it immediately. To somebody else, that may be, when you're done with what you're doing, do that next. So we have to be very clear, and we have to allow for questions at the end. If you're a leader and you have an assistant, let them ask you questions, especially at the beginning. What do you mean by that? Who's Mary? Why did you send her that email? What is the goal? Let them say, and please never label a question stupid. There's a reason this person asked you this question, is because they don't know the answer. And you may have been at your company for 22 years, but this is their third week. You might be fluent in Italian, but they're only on their third week, so don't have a full conversation with them. Let them ask you, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, because otherwise they're like, you should just know. Why are you asking these questions? You should just know. But if you start from the premise of they're trying to get it right, and that it is our assistant role, our admin operations role is by default supposed to be cautious and compliant. Like we are, the executive is like speeding down the highway, in a sports car, and we're like pulling the tractor trailer with the files in the back. Kathleen was talking about, like, you don't want to go too fast. Stuff's gonna flip over, and you're gonna, like, you need them to go slowly, and you need them to get it right. They are the accuracy to your speed, and so it might be painful to slow down a little bit and answer these questions. And I think I see it, on people's face. They're just like, they hired an admin because they're going a million miles an hour and they just need help now. And they want that leverage. And it's like, so sorry. It's going to take a little time. It's going to take a little time, a little attention, more effort than you want it to get it right. But then you'll fly together, as best you can or whatever. But it's, I think the expectation as often as I can, as I'm helping people hire, it's like, this is gonna, you're not gonna go as fast. You're gonna slow down to speed up.
Yeah. When I do my 30, 60, 90-day plans for my executives when they're hiring new assistants, they always look at me like I got 6 heads when I send it to them, because the 30-day plan doesn't have them producing anything. 30 days is learning, shadowing, understanding, reading email, learning about the history of the company, talking to the board of director, learning about the who's he, what's it, be on every call. And she's like, what? 30 days, I need her right now. And I said, if you want her to do her job better to help you, this is how you have to do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it's more expensive in the long term. If you give them responsibilities before either of you are ready and they make mistakes, and now you lose confidence in them and they lose confidence in themselves, and now it's turnover, and that's that's expensive. This is a relationship that you do have to invest in. I'm wondering about, so you had talked about how, paint the picture of the outcome, what it looks like, all 5 senses. And then, don't focus so much on the route. How do you help people who kind of really care about what route they take? Like this, they're used to being the one, either they're used to being the one to do it, so they have their preferred way that they think is maybe the best way, or, it's the way. Or they're just actually happen to be operationally minded and are kind of invested in it. Sometimes the dynamic is really hard for the admin in that case, because they feel like micromanaged. So how do you coach people through those types of scenarios?
Okay. So, if you're an operations minded visionary, that's fine. If you have done something a certain way for a very long time, that's fine. Let them know. I would suggest it be more as, when I've done this in the past, this is how I've done it. I put it in this Salesforce, and then it goes to this, and then it does this, and then we do this, and then that happens. This is how I've done it, and I really like that process. What do you think? Then she or he might go, I like that process. What I may do is do this part first so that I can do that. And they're going, oh my God, that's good. So if you do have a plan, let them know. But if they want to change the route for some reason, maybe you can trust them. When you trust them, give them the route, give them the route, give them the route. One time you're going to look at them and go, they've got this down. They do. And you won't have to tell them it anymore. But if you feel like you need to, tell them. Tell them the things that you need to tell them. Tell them you want it purple and you want it round and you want it with a bow on it. And don't tell them the rest of it. And I will also say, when you're in a leadership seat, especially a CEO, a visionary, an executive director, the leader of a company, if you're leading a bunch of people, sometimes you need to get your nose out of the ops. You're in a different position. I'm sorry to tell you, but you're not being the best version of yourself in that role if you're still tugging on to the ops side of it. We need you to be a visionary. I need you to tell me
We absolutely need you up high, so so it doesn't throttle the growth of the organization. And I think maybe ultimately they probably want that, and they say they want that, I remember, but it might be a trust thing also, right? That you have to be ready to let go of it. You have to know that when you let go of it, it's going to land, and execute. And so that, again, that will take longer for some people than other people. But that's
If you're
sort
going to
of like
hire an
the
EA
type
and you
of
want to literally control
visionary.
every single thing that they do from start to finish and control everything about how they do everything, don't hire a VA. There's a program and a software online that'll do what you want it to do. Because that's not how you treat a human being. And that's not what this person is. They're not a
Right,
slave to
right, 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 right,
you
right,
tell
right.
them to do in the exact way they tell them to do it. They're not going to do it the way that you want them to do it. And that's the point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah, yeah.
supposed to do it smarter, faster, easier, with better outcomes. That's what you hired them for, to do these
Yeah,
things
yeah,
better
yeah.
and smarter and faster. So that's the point.
Yeah, so
They're not going
let them,
to.
but it, again, there has to be that trust building period where you know that they're gonna land it, they're gonna land the plane,
Yeah,
and
and that's
again,
going to be different for
the route,
everyone.
then you can start caring less about the route, and it will feel freeing, I think. But if you've been air traffic controller for so long, it's like you really want to tell that
Yeah.
where to go. I'm thinking, long term, what's a long-term strategy for staying with an EA? Have you seen that evolve over time where people can be together, 2, 5, 8, 10 years? Or is
Sure.
that eventually like a role that people tend to just sort of naturally grow out of?
How did you keep your relationship with your husband for so long?
Oh, 13 years. Change over time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely evolving. Yeah. Checking in, seeing, make sure you're on the same page. Yeah, adjusting. That makes sense.
Growing together.
Yeah,
It's the same thing. If you're going to be
yeah.
with any human for any period of time, for any reason whatsoever, you have to grow together.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. You don't have to grow in the same direction, but you have to grow. You may come to a place where you grow like this and it's not appropriate anymore, and that's fine. But if you're
Right.
both not willing to, like you
If you're
said,
trying to
check
keep it the
other,
same, yeah, yeah, yeah.
communicate, learn more things, show a little bit more skin. If we don't encourage a relationship to move forward in any aspect of our life, same thing with a
To
friendship. You have
stagnate.
to work at it.
Yeah,
These are all,
yeah,
those that don't believe you should do any work to be in a relationship or a friendship. How's that going?
yeah,
How's that
yeah,
going for you? It's the same thing with your team and your executive assistant.
yeah.
If you don't pay them any mind, they don't pay you any mind.
Right, 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 right. You really are like, pouring into each other,
Yeah.
investing in each other.
Yeah. I just
And
hired a
then,
replacement for a woman who's been at the organization for 25 years, supporting the CEO for 25 years.
wow.
If they don't love and know each other, like they would do surgery on each other if the other one
Yeah,
needed it.
yeah,
Much they
yeah, yeah,
know
yeah,
and
yeah,
love
yeah.
each
Like
other.
donate a kidney kind of thing.
Yeah, it is 100% possible. And it's 100% possible for me to put in someone new that was just as good. And we
Yeah,
did.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Both are possible. And I
yeah.
hope I hope more people think about it as a relationship that they can grow together with rather than, I want to be with my exec for 2 years and then a different exec for 2 years and then a different exec
Right,
for
right, 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 right. Yeah. And also, I think really like elevating our understanding of that position, and that dynamic, I think, is what makes it possible for people to imagine a career for themselves in that role, right? It's like if you think you're going to be like, just picking up dry cleaning and getting coffee all the time, for sure, at some point you might feel like you outgrow that. But then if you think you're the operations partner for a visionary in a business, and like really the sky is the limit, because they're always going to need the CEO sounding board, operations perspective. Hey, I'd love to do this thing.
Yeah.
What's your take? Okay, well, remember that other time we did that thing? And this is what you thought about that, and this is what didn't work. And do you still want to do it? Oh, that's a good point. And so it's like you evolve in terms of what value you can offer because also you have that history together.
Yeah, yeah. And you treat it differently.
Mhm.
Excuse the raunchy example, but it's like when you go on a date and you're expecting this to be a one night stand, you act differently than you would if you want a relationship.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Put more into it. You treat it differently. You open yourself up in a different way. You hold your body differently. The topics that you bring up are different. If you're looking for long term, treat it like long term.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you can't
Right.
take
When
someone
it
on
gets
a one night stand and expect them to come back every time. It's a
right.
very raunchy example, sorry.
But
That's my
everyone can relate. You know, we got
that's
a
my
relatable.
command. That's my horrible command. And people are like, why do you say stuff like that on a podcast? I'm like,
Yeah, let's keep it fun. We'll keep it fun, keep it light. Because as you said, again, it all ties back to that relationship, that communication, expectations, alignment. You know, that was the thing when my husband and I first started dating. We were always like, we just want to be on the same page. Are we on the same page? Check in. Are you on the same page? And it ended up working for everything. Are you on the same page about getting married? Are you on the same page about kids? You know, and so it's just like, it doesn't really matter which page it is, but it's just sort of finding kind
finding
of
the
getting back
face.
together. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
understanding what page they're on. I'm on this page. I'm on this page. Is that okay? That's okay if we're on different
Sure,
pages for this thing.
sure,
That's
sure.
fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or maybe I'll get there. I don't know. But
Right, 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 right.
a
But you
constant,
verbalize it.
check
Yeah,
in. How are
yeah,
things
yeah.
going? Feedback, feedback,
You
feedback.
gotta like to talk,
Uh,
you know. So I think you really gotta like to talk to fully
oh,
connect with people,
sorry.
and so yeah.
Can I communicate? Sorry. And
Oh,
regular
yeah.
feedback, uh, annual reviews don't work.
People
They don't
love, yeah, people
work.
love to skip the feedback review thing. They're like, all right, anybody got time for that? But yeah, yeah,
Ain't
you gotta
gonna
make
work. It's not gonna get you where you want to go. If you only checked in with your husband once a year, I'm thinking things
it.
wouldn't work as well as they would if you checked in every day.
Right, 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 right,
Annual reviews are they're let's be honest, all they do is talk about the last 3 months anyway. So
right, right,
it's
right.
it's a weak excuse for feedback.
Mhm,
Minimum every quarter. I did weekly feedback sessions with Simon
mhm,
every Friday
mhm,
morning for 10 minutes. He had 5 minutes and I had 5 minutes, and we would time it. So we wouldn't go on a long train, but we would talk about well, we were, a small business and we could call it whatever we wanted, but what sucked and what didn't suck. So
mhm,
we
mhm,
would
mhm, mhm.
start, or he would start, and we would say one thing that was great and one thing that didn't work that week. And it could be about the other person. Like, hey, Simon, when you did this thing, it really didn't help me get my job done, or it hurt my feelings. Da, 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 da. Or it could be, I'm having a really hard time getting in touch with so and so. Can you help me?
Mhm, mhm,
So it
mhm,
could be
mhm.
anything that week, but it was consistent every single Friday, 10 minutes. What's working,
Yeah.
what's not working. Because
Hold
every day,
space for it. Keep it sacred, that time, because otherwise it's going to get squeezed out of the urgent
yeah.
things, the moment for reflection and actually like intentional
And it made it
communication.
safe for me to know that he
Mhm,
actually
mhm,
cared. The fact that we
mhm,
did
mhm,
it
mhm,
every week made it safe for me, not only to say what I needed to say, but to hear the things that maybe were slightly more harsh than I wanted them to
mhm,
be,
mhm, mhm,
and
mhm.
trusted him.
Yes.
Because I knew this was consistent, and he always showed up for me and he was always there for me. So even if he told me that I was an idiot, I'd be like,
Right,
yeah,
right, right, right. He values you enough to
you're
carve out
right.
that time and protect it for you. So that speaks more,
Right.
that speaks like volumes too.
That's volumes.
So
I
very
trusted
nice.
everything that he said because of that. So when he did tell me that I was acting like an idiot, I would go, you know what, you're probably right.
Way more open to
You're
the
probably
honest
right.
feedback when we make those gestures.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Such a pleasure. A joy to talk to you. We might have you back on hopefully about communication, because I think we could talk about that all day.
All day.
Never enough communicating about communication. In the meantime, Monique is the owner of On Point by Monique Helstrom at www.moniquehelstrom.com if you want to learn more about her services of coaching and recruiting and speaking. And so we'll share this recording with our community, and we can't wait to speak again soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks, Monique.